The biggest trap of the ego is not knowing that you have an ego. The question is whether you know that you have an ego. Ego is one of the biggest forces in human psyche. I actually think it's the biggest. And being aware of having an ego and what your ego is about, because it's very specific with some aspects, but it's also very general. So we're going to talk about the general sort of traits of the ego. Think of the ego as a separate person living in your mind. And that person is your master. You know, a real oppression and imprisonment is when you don't know you're oppressed. So 95%, and I'm being very generous here, of people are living in the grip of their ego. And I'm not talking about narcissistic people. I'm also talking about people pleasers, right? So whatever the archetype you are, that's your ego. That's the profile of your ego. I get really excited by it because this is a really fun game of getting to know your ego and meeting your ego and realizing that you might be in the grip of your ego. So ego is this force in your psyche, in your mind, who has all the answers. And one of the very first layers of the master and one of the very first rules of the master of the ego that you're living by is the master decides your worth. So how worthy you feel really. So if you're feeling that you're worthy more than anyone else, that's ego trap. Or if you feeling and having a sense of you don't deserve stuff, you don't deserve love, so you think of yourself as worthy of less than everybody else. That's also ego trap, right? So ego actually decides your worth. So that's the first rule of the master. And ego is very black and white. So there's very little gray, there's very little curiosity. It's sort of set in stone, right? It's like the decision has been made. There's no discussion, negotiation. You are either worth nothing or everything. And when we come to the sort of neutral ground, this is where the ego loosens its grip. Because once you realize that you like everybody else, and you live that truth, because yes, we are all equals, we are all human beings, we deserve the same amount of love and abundance in our lives. That's actually consciousness work, but that means this is where the authenticity of human soul resides, right? In this neutral territory of your psyche. So the first ego trap is knowing that you are trapped by the convictions and beliefs, limiting beliefs of your ego. And yes, an example would be a narcissistic person who thinks they are the best, they're the most clever, they can dominate and dictate what they want, and their needs are the most important, and they actually decide about other people, you know, how much are they worth. So it's like a dictatorship, right? It's a one-man cult. Narcissistic people are live in a one-man cult. But also, when people don't think they're worthy at all, they have this inferiority syndrome when it comes to self-worth, self-respect. I don't deserve respect. I don't deserve love. I don't deserve good things in my life. That's also an ego trap, right? So, yeah, food for thought is about you figuring out your level of awareness about that force in your psyche, in the realm of your mind, whether you are actually trapped. And one of the very first steps towards freedom from this is acknowledging that you have an ego and getting to know your ego and being friends with your ego, but that is the process. It's not about dissolving the ego or getting rid of the ego. Your ego is protecting you. It's a protective force, right, in your psyche. If you sort of have the intention and have the attitude with regard to your ego about making it your friend and trying to understand it and what it's about and listening to it and getting to know it, then you're going to go much further in the game of life. And this is the part of us that we really want to deny, right? I've heard that from a lot of clients and from a lot of people. Like, first of all, I don't have an ego, but they always think of the ego as something negative, right? As something horrible. Getting to know your ego is the way. But first of all, yeah, keep bringing your attention to the fact that you have one and you need one because you're mostly unconscious in your life and you need protection and you need certain strategy in life, how you relate to people, to problems, and to life in itself. And when you're not aware of that, the ego comes into force and it becomes your master. So keep bringing awareness to that layer of your mind, and I'll see you later. Never give up on yourself.